I wanted to make a little bit more in-depth video about for loops. Uh, Apparently for loops are pretty popular, so want to make sure getting the information you guys need. So starting with my last example, just a simple for loop that runs 10 times, prints high 10 times. Run this real quick so you can see that. Nothing fancy there. So just wanted to talk about some of the ways that you can modify this for loop to do more interesting things. Probably the first thing I want to show is how this I variable that's controlling your for loop can be used inside your loop. So for instance, instead of printing high, let's print out the value of I. I'm going to run this. There you go. So with this, you can see how in this for loop that starts at 0 and goes while it's less than 10, you get I is 0, 1, 2, and up to 9. So you get 10 loops, but your I value goes from 0 to 9. Now, if you need to change that, let's say you want a loop that goes from 1 to 10, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can start the I at 1 instead of 0, and you can go to 11, or you can say while I is less than or equal to 10. Now, when I run this, I is 1 and goes up to 10. Another thing you can do in this for loop, uh, another way you can change it around a little bit, let's say you want odd numbers. So you want to print the odd numbers between 1 and 10. So to do that, now we're going to keep it starting at 1. And instead of using the PostScript incrementer, I'm going to say I equals I plus 2. Now when I run this, every loop I is going to be incremented by 2. It's going to start at 1, so that means it'll go to 1, and then 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on. Another common thing to do with for loops, you might want to run the loop backwards. So let's switch this back to what we had before so you can see how to change that. So this is going to print 1 to 10 again. Well, let's say we want to count down. We want our variable to start at 10. So we just start I, initialize it to 10, and we say while I is greater than, we'll say greater than 0. So every time this loop runs, it's going to decrement I by 1, and it's going to continue running until I is no longer greater than 0. So when we run this, now we see I started at 10 and counted down to 1. All right, the last example I wanted to show with this for loop was iterating over an array. So I've added an array here of integers, just some random numbers. My for loop now cycles from 0 to the length of the array and prints the value at each array element. So when I run this, you can see each element of the array is printed here. Now, there's a better way to do this. It's called an enhanced for loop, and it's done pretty simply. So to convert this to an enhanced for loop, all you have to do is get rid of the inside of the parentheses for your for loop, and you declare a variable of the type of your array. So this is an integer array, so we're going to do int, and I'm going to just call it an element colon, and then the array that you want to iterate over. And you can iterate over arrays, anything that belongs to the collection class. So then down here in the code, instead of accessing array of I, since I doesn't exist anymore, all we have to do is we can use this variable called element that we declared. And each time the loop executes, it's going to be set to one element of the array in order. So now when I run this, you'll actually see the exact same results. Each element of the array printed one at a time. So pretty slick the way that works. Again, that's a enhanced for loop, I think is what that's normally called. You see it in other languages as a for each, but in Java, it's just an enhanced for loop.